Is it time to reevaluate Tyler Stephenson's role as catcher number one? Do the Reds have an answer to the problem in the outfield? We answered these questions and more on today's Locked On Reds. Let's go.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Reds. Thank you so much for joining myself, Jeff Carr, and my co-host Stephen Offenbaker. We are lifelong Cincinnati Reds fans that have turned an addiction into information for you. This is now my 5th season doing this podcast. This is Steve's 2nd season doing the podcast with me. We love the Cincinnati Reds. We talk about them on a daily basis. We are so happy that you have joined us to talk some Reds baseball with us because it's what we do. We encourage you, if you're listening, hit us up on Twitter, or if you're watching here on YouTube, make sure you drop a thought in our comment section, because this Reds team is worth talking about, and we appreciate you and your thoughts. Locked On Reds is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every single day, and if you're an everydayer, we'd love to hear from you in the comments section on Twitter. If we're at the ballpark even, come up and say, hey, love meeting everybody whenever we're down at the ballpark. Coming up on today's show, the Reds were off yesterday, but there's still plenty going on around this team, because the big question that everybody is talking about is, what do these struggles from Tyler Stephenson mean for the catcher position right now? We'll also look at what those questions might mean for the future of the catcher of the position, just a little bit, that peek into that future conversation. The Reds have an interesting problem in the outfield. Not a problem with Will Benson. He's a problem himself for other teams. But they have a right-handed hitting situation that we've got to dissect a little bit. And the Reds are going to play the Guardians for the first two. The Ohio Cup, Steve. It's about to start. That vaunted trophy that, oh boy. Okay, I'm just kidding. We're getting a little bit excited about nothing there. That's fine. But let's start with the Tyler Stephenson of it all, because this year has not been what we expected, and I feel like we have to ask the question, because he's not been at all who we thought we thought he'd be as a player. But does that mean that Tyler Stephenson should be supplanted as the top catcher on the depth chart?
Well, it's a really difficult question, Jeff. And the unfortunate part of it is the answer might be yes, at least temporarily. I went out on a limb more than most people with what we thought Tyler Stephenson was going to be this year. I really thought the Reds' plan to work him into multiple positions, keep his legs fresh, was going to be a benefit to him, and it has not been. In fact, he's been outperformed by Luke Maile. And if you look at Luke Maile's numbers, and you're going to get into a lot of what average catcher numbers is, I just want to say these numbers right up top, because right now Luke Maile's hitting 252, 312, 449. His OPS plus, Jeff, is 100. And I want that to stick in everybody's ear, because you're going to tell us some things. I saw your notes. You're going to tell us some things about catcher OPS plus, and that number 100 matters. And we're going to circle back to that. Does it mean that Luke Maile's a better catcher overall for all time than Tyler Stephenson? Probably not. But the Reds are in a playoff race, and you put the hot hand out there. And right now, I think Luke Maile's the hot hand. And it leads us to a bigger question of really, what is wrong with Tyler Stephenson? What is going on? What has his performance been? What does it mean? And for me, I think it means he's just having a bad year. I don't think it means he's suddenly become a bad player.
Big shout out to our friends over at Reds Content Plus, and Steve Mancuso. He wrote a great article kind of breaking down Tyler Stephenson's struggles. You ought to go check it out. You can go to redscontentplus.com right now and read some different stuff that they've got. But when it comes to Tyler Stephenson, Steve kind of pointed this out in that last year, the small sample size that we got, the 50 games that he played while he was healthy, he was extremely lucky. And he had an OPS plus of over 130. You know, he was over 30% better than league average according to OPS plus for the 50 games that he played. But he had a very high batting average on balls in play that completely inflated all of those numbers. And what's interesting is he looks at the 400 plus at bats he got in 2021, his first full rookie year, and they're pretty close to what we see this year with some key differences. The biggest part for me, and it was something that we talked about in spring training, I don't think I was on the same page homer-wise, but I definitely was still really, really overly optimistic based on how many home runs he's hit this year. The power has always been the same with him. His isolated power. It's a statistic we did talk about in spring training. It's a crude way of explaining a player's ability to go for extra bases, because what you do is you take a player's slugging percentage and you subtract his batting average from it. The idea being you get rid of singles, and then whatever's left is just the percentage of time he hits extra bases. It's not been very good. In fact, in both 2021 and this season, he's 20% below league average. That's just a league average hitter when it comes to isolated power. So that right there is kind of the jumping off point for the rest of our discussion.
Yeah, it's interesting that, that number shows him to be 20% below league average, when if you also look at his OPS plus, he's 20% below league average. It's very, very telling that's kind of where we land, because it's been a real disappointment. And listen, this is not hate on Tyler Stephenson. I want to be clear about that. Tyler Stephenson's been good to us. He's come on this show. He's talked baseball with us. He'll do it again this coming off season, I'm sure, but it's been disappointing. And I don't know, maybe I was guilty, Jeff, of doing that thing that we do sometimes with guys like Hunter Green and guys like Ellie De La Cruz. And, maybe I got just a little overly excited and let that influence what I thought he was going to do. But I truly believed that the rest and keeping him healthy was going to make a huge difference in what he was going to be able to produce for this team. And maybe he's not going to be ever the offensive juggernaut that we hoped, that we wanted. And maybe that was an unrealistic expectation on our part.
Yeah, and I think that some of the things that he's been doing this year, it's almost raising more questions than its answer. We thought coming into this season, we were looking at him as that juggernaut, as, almost like a Superman of the lineup type dude. And we said, you get a full year of health under him, he's going to show that. We're getting a full year of health from Tyler Stephenson, and he's really brought up more questions. And you're right. This isn't bag on Tyler Stephenson. This is just what he has provided. And the worthy question that everyone right now in Reds country is talking about is he the unquestioned catcher number one? And the biggest thing for me, and it's interesting because, we talk about the lack of power. His walk rate is very consistent. He's still above league average at drawing walks. The biggest thing that has really kind of changed is his inability to hit fastballs. And it's not four-seam fastballs. He's still kind of okay with that. It's cut fastballs, sinking fastballs, two-seam fastballs. The high velocity pitches that have just a little bit of movement to them absolutely confound him. In fact, it shows that in his rookie season, he had a 12% whiff rate against fastballs. This year, 25%, double the whiff rate. And in a day and age where the cut fastball is so popular, that has really been the biggest bugaboo of all of this for him.
And it makes me wonder some things. And I think you and I talked about this off air one time. I don't know that I have said this out loud on a show yet, but shoulder injuries, clavicle injuries, arm injuries, they're all really wonky things. We saw this with Jesse Winker back in the day. And I know where Jesse Winker has ended up and how he looks right now. But there was a time there where all of his power went away and nobody could really figure out what was going on with him. And then he had some off-season shoulder surgery and his shoulder got put back together because an injury had derailed him. And he came back hitting some bombs. And I wonder a little bit if that clavicle break hasn't affected how fast he can get around on a ball, hasn't affected his swing. I don't have any data to support that.
Could it affect him defensively too? Yeah,
it could. Maybe at some point we need to go dig and look at. I know there's bat speed measurements available that we can compare what his bat speed looks like this year versus last before the injury. I would not be shocked to learn that if his bat speed was faster before he got injured last year. It wouldn't shock me. But it leaves us with a conundrum, Jeff, because I don't think that Luke Maile is in the Reds' long-term plans as catcher number one to be around here for a lot of years. But right now, he's at least playing his way into the conversation while Stevenson struggles. And there's a lot of numbers I know that you've pulled out that when you compare the numbers that you're going to have for Stevenson with the numbers that Maile's put up, it really makes you want to develop a plan to get Maile more at bats.
Yeah, and I think that Maile's played his way into conversation for a contract for next year, maybe even multiple years, because number one, there's not like a catcher who's ready-made in the Reds system that's ready to be called up. So you're looking at your two dudes unless you go get a Mr. Outside hire to join this catcher room next year. And when you talk about Tyler Stephenson as it compares to other catchers, like we have been doing this thing where we compare him to Luke Maile, we compare him to 2022 Tyler Stephenson, all this other stuff. League average catchers have an OPS plus of 91. That's 11 points higher than where Tyler Stephenson is right now. League average catchers get on base just above 30% of the time. Tyler Stephenson's got an advantage there. He's pretty good at getting on base. However, catchers' isolated power. We talked about that with Tyler Stephenson, how it's below average. Catcher isolated power is 158. It's clear to me that at least this season, what we've seen from Tyler Stephenson, he's a slightly below average catcher, and that's not something that you or I expected. I did see, and it's interesting that I'm just kind of thinking of this, and this wasn't something I wrote into the notes. I remember preseason seeing, I think it was Fangraphs had a projection for him that I thought was super pedestrian and something that I was like, boy, if this happens, we've got questions about Tyler Stephenson. And if I go back and look at that, I got to go look it up. But if I go back and look at that, I'm pretty sure it's right on the money. And that's a bummer to me because I think it raises questions for the future.
Yeah, so I told you it was important to remember that 100 OPS plus, folks.
Yeah.
Because let's look at those numbers Jeff just threw at you. League average for a catcher is 91. That's what catchers are putting up across the league. Average catcher OPS plus. Luke Maile is about 10% above that. He's at 100 right now. It swings a point or two depending on how he did in whatever game he plays. But let's call it 10% better. Luke Maile right now, 10% better. Tyler Stephenson is at 81 right now, OPS plus. 10% below, a 20% swing. There's an argument to be made that the playing time allocation needs to change, Jeff. If it were me right now, until Luke Maile proves otherwise, I would work the catching situation just like the starting rotation, in that Luke Maile would catch 3 out of 5 days. He's already Andrew Abbott's personal catcher. I would find 2 more guys and just have them start every other day, and then Maile gets back-to-back starts. Starter number 5, bringing it back around to starter number 1. That's the way I would do it right now. Now, the offense could change things. Tyler Stephenson could get hot. You can mix it up again. But until that happens, the Reds are in a pennant race, and you put your hot hand. You put your guy out there that's getting it done a little bit better than the other guy. Right now, that's Luke Maile. And I'm not ready to quit on Tyler Stephenson, but I sure am ready for the Reds to make the postseason.
Right. And, you know, he's got 6 weeks. He could probably turn it around in 6 weeks. There's still plenty of time to change the narrative on his season. But, I mean, it's been a long season so far for Tyler Stephenson. And, I mean, I think I'm with you. I think there's got to be some underlying thing with that shoulder. And maybe that's something that gets cleared up in the offseason. But right now, it looks like he has brought up more questions than he's answered so far this year.
Yeah. All right, Jeff, let's move on from Tyler Stephenson. Coming up next, the Reds have a problem in the outfield that may need to be addressed this offseason. We've talked about this several times, but could the answer be on the team already right now? We'll talk about that coming up next. Today's episode is brought to you in part by Ibotta. Are you tired of spending your hard-earned money without getting something in return? Have you been dreading buying all of the necessities you need for your household? Well, it's time to stop spending your hard-earned money without getting anything back. Enter Ibotta. Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items, from produce to personal care to pantry goods, so that you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. Either link your loyalty account or upload your receipt after you shop to get your cash back. It's that easy. The average Ibotta user earns $120 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, or it just puts a little bit of extra money in your pocket that you could put towards anything else, like a flight you've been eyeing, a trip, a little vacation spot to the beach. If you're living in Hawaii like me, Ibotta can help you with that. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 for just trying Ibotta by using the code MLB when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app and use the code MLB. That's Ibotta in the Google Play or App Store. Use the code MLB today. Oh, and we're back. How's that? Sorry, Jeff. You can catch. Remember, if you can't get to the all right. Remember, if you can't get to the ballpark, you can catch every pitch of the Reds' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just download the app and search the word Reds. Also, thanks so much for making Locked On Reds your first listen with my screw ups and all. You listen to me every day, and I appreciate you. Everydayers, coming up on the next Locked On Reds podcast, we are going to dissect another Graham Ashcraft start. And here's hoping that it has been as good as his last few starts. He has been exciting to watch. Oh, yeah. All right, Jeff, I teased it up there in the last segment. The outfield is a question in need of an answer. We've looked at the outfield. They've managed to get some great production out of some guys that have been around here, but there has been some looming questions on the horizon about what they're going to do with this outfield long term, especially in this day and age of platoons where you need a righty and a lefty. You almost now need 6 outfielders, or 4 or 5 outfielders, and then a guy like Spencer Steer that can play infield and outfield to kind of round it out, right? So that's where the Reds need to get to, and they're not quite there right now. We thought enter some guys being called up as injury replacements that have played well enough to maybe change this narrative just a little bit.
Yeah, because I think that, if Nick Kroll is compiling a shopping list for this offseason, a right-handed bat in the outfield right now is a must, I think. And yes, there are a couple of guys that I think should get a shot. I start with Henry Ramos. And Ramos, he's 30. I believe he's 31. I was going to say 31 or 32. He is a career minor leaguer. He had a cup of coffee with the Diamondbacks back in 2021 before coming here out of the Korean League from last season. So there's been a lot of folks that have seen him do his thing and feel like he doesn't deserve a huge shot. 3,456 at-bats in the minor leagues. Now, he hit 284 in those 3,456 at-bats. So there's something there. Maybe his current batting average this season, he's hitting 265. But it's weird because it's kind of helped by a very high, not very high, but definitely a high batting average on balls in play at 353. League average is right around 295-ish, something like that. So almost 60 points higher than league average there. And he has a very low, we talked about this with Tyler Stephenson, he has a very low isolated power of 0.74. So 74 points there. Difference between batting average and slugging percentage. So all those numbers say this. Can he be more than a quadruple A guy if we give him a chance?
My gut tells me no. And I know that we don't have a huge sample size of major league statistics to look at for him. He's now played in parts of 2 seasons. He played some in Arizona in 2021 and now for the Reds in 2023. When you combine those 2 stints in the majors, it amounts to a whopping 39 games, Jeff. It's not a huge sample size at all. In those 39 games, though, career 237, 326, 322 on his slash line. Right now, the Reds don't really have another choice. You're saying let's let him play it out.
End of the season. Yeah,
sure. Right. Yeah. They really don't have any other options. And why not play him? He's going to get some at bats. He could play himself into changing this conversation. The more I look at his numbers, 3,456 at bats, decent sample size in the minor leagues, 284. Decent. We've seen players like this before. We've seen players that are 4A players
Yeah.
that can go down to the minors, continue to kind of knock the cover off the ball, get you excited again. You bring them back up, and they're the same player that they always were at the major league level. They can't really deliver. Aristides Aquino is the most recent example of this. The Reds would send him down. He would play super well at Louisville. They would bring him back up, and he couldn't hit a curveball to save his life. And he would go back down, and he would knock the cover off the ball, and they would bring him back up. And turns out he still can't hit that curveball. So I worry about that with Henry Ramos. I don't know that he's anything more than an adequate fill-in right now when we really need an adequate fill-in. But because there's no other options, what does it hurt to continue to run him out there and see what you've got? Does that mean that you give him at-bats that would go to Fairchild right now? Maybe. Because in the grand scheme of things, I think we know kind of who Stuart Fairchild is. He's always going to be that fill-in guy. He's going to be that guy that can come up from AAA and give you 14 days of decent coverage until whoever it was that he replaced comes back.
Yeah, he's like a 6th or 7th outfielder. I have him on this list of like, can we figure out who he is? I think we have. I think he is that quintessential quadruple A guy. And maybe I'm just a sucker for a switch hitter, and Henry Ramos is a switch hitter, and that could be a weapon if he figures some things out. But it's like, yeah, there's still plenty of numbers that are just staring right back at me and saying, I don't know that you're really going to find what you're looking for if you give Henry Ramos much more of a run. And look, the only run that we're looking for is the right-handed platoon side for the outfield. I think that they found their dude for the left-handed side in Will Benson. And I think that there's a big argument to be made that TJ Friedl could be that guy. I think this is something we're talking about a lot this offseason, where it's like, it's not a foregone conclusion that he is, but then what's Jake Fraley to this team? There's the left-handed side I think that the Reds, they could upgrade from, certainly, but they have a pretty high baseline right now. It's not where the right-handed platoon side is, because yes, Spencer Steer fits into the right-handed platoon side, but he's also going to play some infield too. So I think to say that he is the Reds' best right-handed platoon option in the outfield, which he currently is, just really kind of underscores how weak of a group it is for the Reds right now.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way of saying how this situation is, because Spencer Steer is the best bat in the right-handed group right now. And that's some necessity. That's some just Spencer Steer wanting to make sure that he was playing every day. And that's some Spencer Steer really wanting to be a team guy and help things out. But you're absolutely right. I don't think you can look at him as being the 2024 solution to this problem. And I don't think really, I mean, the question, the way you phrase this is the 2024 solution on this roster right now? No, I really don't think they are. It's not Fairchild. It's not Henry Ramos. It's not Spencer Steer. And I'm not saying Spencer Steer shouldn't play every day. I'm just saying He's going to have to move around. He's going to have to cover days off. He's going to have to cover injuries. He can't be the guy that you rely on to pencil in every time that there's a left-handed pitcher on the mound to play left field. I don't think he can be that guy long-term.
Between hitting, but also the defense. I mean, we saw it in multiple different series over the last few weeks where it's like guys aren't taking the best routes to the ball. And Will Benson's been a culprit of this as well. But, we've seen some guys take bad routes. We've seen guys that you can run on. It doesn't matter. Like, I need somebody who can be a consistent defensive force out there as well. If you're going to put them in as the right-handed platoon, like, it can't just be a bat out there. Like, the days of just having a hit first only and you not worry about the defense, I think that's past. If you're going to be a legitimate playoff contender, you can't punt half of the game and punt the fielding aspect of things. Remember 2021, it felt like they were just punting fielding, and they just say, let's try and hit and score 12 runs a game. And then that just didn't work out. So they've got to have bona fide right-handed outfielders on this roster next year. And I'm with you. I think it's Mr. Outside Hire at this point.
Yeah, this position should definitely be on Nick Kral's shopping list coming into the 2024 offseason.
But I know this, Steve. We got 2 games. We got an opportunity here for the Reds because the Guardians are coming to town for the Ohio Cup. And we'll look at a few key players to watch out for coming up next. Today's episode is brought to you in part by FanDuel. You know, football season is about to kick off, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long. Because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you get bonus bets for every time they win in the regular season. That's right, you just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every victory. You can use your bonus bets on point spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more. You could sign up, place a bet on the Bengals today to win it all, and you get paid for every win they accumulate in the regular season before the Super Bowl even happens. You can also join in on the baseball action every day, like today's Reds-Guardians game. The Reds are actually slight underdogs at home to the Guardians. I don't really get that. We'll talk about that later. And FanDuel has Cincy at -102 to win. You can also combine prop bets within the game to make a same-game parlay for even bigger payouts. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. And remember, if you can't be down at the ballpark to catch every pitch of the Reds' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app, just search the word Reds. You can follow the podcast on all platforms, including right here on YouTube. If this is your first time, make sure that you are subscribed and you click that bell to get notified whenever we've got new content for you. Also, join our Locked On Reds community on Discord. A lot of great folks talking some baseball there. We got the link in the description. Come join us over on Discord for Locked On Reds. All right, Steve, I'm just going to come out and say it. The Reds need the Reds should take both games of this series.
Sweet. Absolutely.
This is a team that is beatable in the Guardians.
No, it is. And the first game of this series looks like it could be, at least while the starters are in the game, a bit of a pitcher's duel. Graham Ashcraft is going up against Logan Allen. And these two guys have both been pitching really, really well over the last stretch of baseball. Logan Allen's 5-5, 3.55 ERA in 17 games this season. His numbers basically break down like this, Jeff. 8.67 K per nine and 2.51 bases on balls per nine. So he's walking 2.51 guys per 9 innings, striking out nearly 9 guys per 9 innings. So a batter an inning. He's done all this in 91 innings pitched. We've talked a lot about Graham Ashcraft's return, him turning it around. He's not been a high strikeout guy. He's getting a lot of ground ball outs, being very pitch efficient, not running up a bunch of 3-2 counts. I'm kind of looking forward to this matchup, but I think that it's very, very winnable for the Reds in the first game of this series, especially if the bats continue to go through this wake-up cycle that they seemingly have over the last couple games over there in Pittsburgh. So I'm kind of looking forward to this first one.
This is not the Cleveland pitching staff of years past. This is not the team that is just going to absolutely shut down every aspect of the Reds lineup. Their starting pitching is solid. Logan Allen is solid. Their bullpen is pretty decent, average to above average, but it's nobody that you're worried about. I mean, when they get to Emmanuel Clase, he's a pretty good pitcher. Yes. Outside of him, not really anybody I'm super scared of. And the Guardians themselves, their front office, told everybody else in the league where they see their team at the deadline. They took advantage of market plays, and they sold high on some guys. Steve, when you sell high on guys, what's that first word in sell high?
Sell.
You sell. This is not a team that thought they were going to be a playoff team. It's not a team the Reds should really be worried about how they match up with, because I think they can take them. It's like, we can take them. We got these guys. Now, there is an under-the-radar Guardian that I'm kind of watching out for a little bit. Is right fielder Oscar Gonzalez. In his last 14 games, he's got 15 hits and 46 at-bats. That gives him a .326 batting average. He does have 4 doubles and a triple to boot. Kind of one of those guys, whenever you see a lineup come out, you're going to be like, I don't know who Oscar Gonzalez is. That sounds like the guy from The Office, and that's not Oscar Gonzalez. It's different Oscar. But he's also going to be a dude that probably gets a few hits in this series. Just kind of be ready for that.
Yeah, and so with Allen on the mound, left-handed pitcher, Jeff, I kind of tried to put together what I thought would be a decent lineup for the Reds to run out to start off this series. And the key element for me in putting this lineup together was that it not include Kevin Newman playing. So that's the foundation I started on with this lineup. So thinking about it, I with a lefty on the mound, I felt that it was important to limit the amount of lefties in the lineup. So, Will Benson's going to get the day off and sit down. I did leave TJ Friedl in this lineup. So let's run through it. I'm going to bat Matt McLain lead off. If I get to make the lineup for this game versus the Guardians, Matt McLain's going to lead it off for me. He'll play second base. I then go with TJ Friedl. Now you're like, Steve, you just said you were trying to get lefties out of this lineup. Well, I think TJ Friedl has earned a little bit of playing time against the left-handed pitchers. And 62
he's
at bats.
Platoon proof this season.
Yeah, in 60 at bats against left-handed pitching, he's 290, 333, 403. That to me, you start him in center field. He's batting second. Then I go with Ellie De La Cruz playing short, switch hitter, followed up by Spencer Steer playing third base, batting cleanup. Now, our guy, we just talked about him, Tyler Stephenson. I don't put him at catcher, but I'm going to let him bat fifth in this lineup, and I'm going to put him at designated hitter and see what he can do with a lefty on the mound. You can't sit down all the lefties given the injury situation. So Joseph Daniel is going to get a start against a left-handed pitcher, and hopefully the Reds chase the lefty early, and it doesn't matter. But Votto would be playing first base, batting sixth. Then your guy, Henry Ramos, we just talked about him. I'm going to stick him out in right field. I'm going to let him bat seventh. Luke Maile, because Stevenson's already in this lineup. Luke Maile is going to catch and hit eighth. And then I rounded out with Stuart Fairchild playing left and batting ninth. I think this is a lineup that can get to Allen just a little bit. And then, of course, you pinch hit some of these guys out when you get into the Guardians bullpen.
I like this. There's one frustrating thing that means that Kevin Newman's going to start in this game. And that is because I don't think a lot of teams like to start both of their catchers. Mm-hmm. And get it stuck into a situation where Tyler Stephenson cannot switch out to catcher if something happens to Luke Maile, God forbid. And then you would have to give up the DH spot for a pitcher. But
you let Joey catch. It's his last year as a Red. Let him
Joey
catch.
Yeah. He was drafted as a catcher. He was, once upon a time. But no, I'm all for any lineup that doesn't include Kevin Newman. Well, it's not going to be.
Fortunately, I feel like you're right. They're not going to put both catchers in the lineup, which means Kevin Newman's probably going to play first base, and it's just going to throw the whole thing off. But I tried.
That's unfortunate. But hey, game 2, you got a righty on the mound, and a righty that the Reds rocked back when he was a Dodger, because Noah Syndergaard actually pitched at Great American Ballpark on June 7th. June 7th. Very fateful day, Steve. First home run for Ellie De La Cruz. It was off of Noah Syndergaard, so that was a really good day for this Reds lineup. And Noah Syndergaard has been pretty human here recently.
He has. In his last 15 games, he's 2-5 with a 6.35 ERA. In his last 3 starts, let's break it down a little bit more. In his last 3 times out, 0-1, 9.47 ERA. He did strike out 12 while only walking 4. But here's the kicker. In 19 innings pitched, he's allowed 20 earned runs.
Thor lost Mjolnir a long time ago, apparently. Mm-hmm. I know his nickname's still Thor, but we ain't worried about the Norse god of thunder pitching in this game because, he's getting rocked. The Reds put it on him in that June 7th game. He had 3 innings pitched, 6 earned runs allowed on 7 hits. He did allow another home run on top of the Ellie De La Cruz home run. Just huge game for the lineup in that one. Hopefully they go back to that and they just pile it on Wednesday. I'd love that too because I'm going to be in attendance on the Wednesday game. Hopefully we see another homer for Ellie De La Cruz and maybe another for CES and a couple other guys. But I really think that overall, just looking at this series, they got Jose Ramirez. I'm not really worried about anybody else. I'm not really worried. And look, Josh Naylor has probably been their second best hitter of the year. Like last week, he got an injury that's going to keep him out for like 3 to 6 weeks or something like that. So he's not going to be in this series. Andres Jimenez is not really taking that next step. I'm looking at a couple of dudes that last year really put it on the Reds pitching, and they're not really scaring you this year. It's Jose Ramirez and maybe somebody else. I don't really know, but I think the Reds should win 2 games here.
Yeah, with Ashcraft and Abbott both going in this little short 2-game series, I'm calling it right now, Jeff. Sweep.
Absolutely. 2-game series sweep. And that is how we are going to end today's Locked On Reds podcast. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Remember that if you can't be down at the ballpark, you can catch every pitch of the Reds' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search the word Reds.
And that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Reds. Thanks for always making us your first listen every day. Everydayers, coming up tomorrow, we're going to break down this Graham Ashcraft start, and we're going to be talking about a win. In the meantime, Jeff, what can everybody expect from you and me?
They can expect us to be locked on the rehab outings. Hunter Green, all those guys getting ready to come back. They can expect us to be locked on Connor Phillips and some guys who could be coming up from AAA. By the way, Connor Phillips going to be a topic of conversation on Locked On MLB Prospects. So join Lindsey Crosby after you're done listening to us here, and they can expect us to be locked on Reds every single day. Like how we flipped that there. Bet that's going to throw some people off.
How could you mention rehab starts and not talk about Kurt Casale?
Yeah.